Caitlin worked day and night to support her family. After being fired without reason, she thought she had lost everything. But an unusual encounter with an Arab sheikh changed her destiny and left her pregnant with twins. In the end, she regains her dignity and finds love she never expected. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Caitlin's day began with an unsettling stillness in the air. She felt it the moment she stepped into the hushed corridor leading to the HR department. Her heart pounded in her chest while fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a stark glow on the beige walls. Never in her years at the company had she been summoned so abruptly. Yet here she was, clutching her purse tight against her ribs as she approached the small office where an uncomfortable conversation seemed destined to take place. Inside, the HR manager, a polite but anxious woman named Rosa, looked more apologetic than Caitlin expected. As soon as Caitlin sat down, Rosa cleared her throat and handed over a single sheet of paper. Caitlin's pulse quickened at the formal heading and the crisp edges of the page. She barely managed to read the first sentence, termination of employment, before a numbness crept over her. Her throat went dry. "This must be a mistake," she said, struggling to keep her voice from shaking. "I've worked here for 5 years. I've given this place everything." Rosa's eyes flickered with sympathy, but her lips formed words that sounded detached, rehearsed. "I'm really sorry. The directors decided to let you go, effective immediately." Caitlin's mind spun. Images of her grandmother's frail figure at home, her hospital bed crowding the small living room, the stack of medical bills that never seemed to shrink. Everything came crashing into that tiny office. "There has to be a reason," she insisted, her voice nearly breaking. "I have deadlines, projects. It's out of my hands." Rosa sighed, gesturing to a thicker file on her desk. "I only know there were allegations of misconduct, but I'm not at liberty to discuss them." Caitlin's heart lurched. Allegations? Of what? She had never so much as taken a single company pen home. She slumped back in the squeaky chair, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, yet anger quickly replaced shock. She stood, pressing her purse tighter to keep her hands from shaking. "I need to talk to someone higher up. This is my life we're talking about." Before Rosa could respond, Caitlin strode out. Her pace was brisk, her breath ragged as she made her way past cubicles full of unsuspecting co-workers. The overhead lights felt glaring, everything magnified in that moment of crisis. She paused briefly to recall how her grandmother would fill the house with the comforting scent of herbal tea each morning. The memory gave her a strange kind of resolve. In a few strides, she reached her boss's office. The door was ajar. She pushed it open, ignoring the reluctance on his face. "Why am I being fired?" she demanded, voice tight with desperation. "I need the truth." He barely looked up. His expression, distant and uninterested, made her heart twist. "These matters are handled by HR, Caitlin. I suggest you speak with them for details." She clenched her jaw. "I just did, and they said it was a decision from higher up. That means you had to be involved, right?" "I'm sorry," he said flatly, tapping a pen against a report. "I have a conference call in a minute." With a flick of his hand, he dismissed her like an unwelcome guest. Her frustration boiled over. "I have no idea why this is happening. I said I'm sorry," he repeated, voice colder, more final. "There's nothing else to discuss." She stared at him, her pride sparking once more, but she sensed it was useless. She had to find answers elsewhere. Shoulders tense, she exited, nearly colliding with Paula from accounting, who stood in the corridor with wide, sympathetic eyes. "Hey," Paula murmured, placing a gentle hand on Caitlin's arm. "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." "Did you know anything about this?" Caitlin asked, her voice low but urgent. Paula glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Some of us overheard talk in the directors' meeting. They're trying to push someone out before a big investor arrives tomorrow." She swallowed, looking uneasy. Word is, you became a convenient scapegoat. Caitlin's grip on her purse tightened. Why me? I've done nothing wrong. Paula's gaze darted down the hall, then back to Caitlin. We think they're trying to cover up something. You must have come too close to information they don't want uncovered. The fluorescent lights above them flickered. Dread sank into Caitlin's stomach. This is absurd, she said, voice raw with betrayal. I need proof there's no legitimate reason to fire me. Paula squeezed her arm gently before stepping away, her expression clouded with worry. Be careful, she whispered. These directors are serious. If you dig too deep, they'll come for you. Heart pounding, Caitlin marched back toward HR, determined to demand any documents that mentioned her alleged misconduct. Rosa, still sitting at her desk with a pained expression, silently handed over a small stack of papers. On the surface, they detailed performance issues, task delays, and team disruptions. Nowhere did they cite specific examples or verifiable dates. It was all nebulous, conveniently impossible to refute without deeper investigation. These are just accusations, Caitlin argued, flipping through the pages, her frustration mounting. Anyone could write this with no evidence. Rosa nodded, whispering, I'm aware, but the directors have authority. Caitlin spat out a bitter laugh. Authority? More like they're abusing it. Moments later, as she walked down the corridor toward the elevators, she spotted Mr. Duarte, a steely-eyed director with a neat, imposing posture. He stepped in front of her, blocking her way. Heard you were leaving us, he said with a cool smile. You know exactly what's happening, she shot back, anger burning in her eyes. I'm being set up. His smile widened, but it never reached his eyes. What a shame, he said smoothly. Accidents happen, especially to those who ask too many questions. She froze. Something in his tone made her skin crawl. Are you threatening me? He shrugged, adjusting the collar of his suit jacket. I'd call it a friendly warning. Some people just don't belong in certain conversations, and those who don't belong tend to regret meddling. Fury mixed with a sudden jolt of fear. She swallowed hard, her thoughts drifting to her grandmother, fragile and reliant on her care. Leave my family out of this. I can leave your family out of this if you don't push any further, Duarte said quietly. If you do, well, I can't promise anything. Caitlin's chest constricted with rage and worry, her nails digging into the soft leather of her purse. She glared at him, refusing to show weakness. I'm going to prove you're behind this. She pivoted, not waiting for a response, and strode to the elevator. Her hands shook as she pressed the button. Moments later, she emerged in the busy main lobby, tears threatening to spill. She walked briskly toward the exit, the echo of her heels sharp against the polished floor. Once outside, she inhaled the fresh air in gulps, eyes stinging. Her phone buzzed. She fumbled to answer, her voice strained. Grandma? My dear, I know you're upset. Her grandmother's gentle voice came through, faint but full of love. I wish there was something I could do. Caitlin pressed her free hand to her forehead, blinking back tears. I'll figure this out, she said, trying not to let her grandmother hear the quiver in her voice. I promise. They spoke for a minute longer, her grandmother's strength a fragile thread she clung to. After ending the call, Caitlin felt an urgency to salvage what she could. She slipped back into a side entrance of the building, scanning the corridor for Paula. Her friend found her first, stepping out of a supply closet with a small envelope clutched to her chest. Take this, Paula whispered, glancing over her shoulder nervously. I got it off the server. It's not much, but it might help. Caitlin peered into the envelope. Printed emails and attachments. She couldn't glean them all at a glance, but words like funnel, accounts, and oversee transactions leapt out at her. What are these? Paula's eyes flicked anxiously down the hall. Something big. Could connect certain directors to illegal deals. I can't risk holding on to them. Caitlin whispered a heartfelt, thank you, and slipped the envelope into her purse. Before she could say more, Paula disappeared around a corner, leaving Caitlin with fresh determination pulsing in her veins. She quickly made her way outside, stepping into the bright afternoon sun that momentarily blinded her. Voices of chatting employees, the hum of passing cars, and the distant siren of an ambulance all blended into a dizzying backdrop as she headed for her car. News was spreading around the company about the foreign investor arriving tomorrow, a sheikh named Ibrahim. As Caitlin settled into the driver's seat, she recalled something Paula had said. The directors were doing everything to keep secrets hidden from him. She turned the envelope in her hands, then flipped through the printouts. Her heart skipped at the mention of unreported funds. She felt the weight of responsibility land fully on her shoulders. Maybe this sheik's arrival was more than a coincidence. It might be her chance to expose the truth. Adrenaline surged through her, mingling with lingering fear of what Mr. Duarte had threatened. She exhaled a shaky breath, glancing at the reflection of her own eyes in the rearview mirror. Even now, raw anger and faint hope battled within her. She thought about her grandmother, waiting at home, and how she had to stand strong, for both of them. Slowly, she closed her eyes, whispering, "I won't let them scare me off." Steadying her nerves, she unfolded the documents once more, scanning line after line. Fraud, hidden accounts, and suspicious approvals for major transactions, everything pointed to a massive cover-up. It wasn't just about her job anymore. It was about saving her grandmother, about stopping these people from hurting anyone else, and about retaining the dignity she'd worked so hard to build. A gust of air from the nearby street swept across her windshield, and she gazed out at the city. Tomorrow was shaping up to be a critical day. She thought of the sheikh arriving, possibly someone with enough power to topple the directors if he knew the truth. The corners of her mouth twitched in a determined half-smile. With these documents, she might have the leverage to force them to listen. The sun began to dip behind the tall office buildings, shadows lengthening across the asphalt. She grabbed her car keys, then lingered for a moment, letting the weight of the last hour sink in. Never had she imagined her life flipping so abruptly. But if she backed down now, those directors would crush her future and threaten the one person she loved most. Her pulse thrummed as she read the final lines in the emails, which confirmed her suspicion. Her firing was no accident. She realized this was only the beginning of a battle that could rock the entire corporation. Caitlin sits behind the wheel, eyes wide at the incriminating lines in the email printouts. She realizes this battle is far bigger than just her job, and Sheikh Ibrahim's impending arrival might be the key to exposing the truth. Caitlin woke before dawn, staring at the emails she had spread across her cramped kitchen table. The words glared back at her under the harsh light of a single bulb, each phrase evidence of a scheme she still struggled to comprehend. Despite the knot in her stomach, she took a steadying breath. The company had thrown her out, but she wasn't going to leave in silence. She changed into a simple blouse and skirt, clothes she used to wear to the office when she was still an employee. Every fold reminded her of how badly she needed that paycheck, how her grandmother depended on it. With an ache in her chest, she carefully tucked the incriminating documents into her purse. Today would be the day she tried to speak with someone on the board, anyone who might listen. On her way out, she paused by her grandmother's bedroom. The door stood slightly ajar, the faint hum of the old fan stirring the air. She could just make out her grandmother's sleeping figure under a patchwork blanket. The sight flooded her with both tenderness and urgency. This fight was for her. With quiet determination, she slipped outside. She arrived at the corporate building just as the sun broke over the skyline, its early rays cutting through the glass facade. Employees passed by with takeout coffees and quick conversations, sparing only brief, curious glances at Caitlin, who clearly didn't belong there anymore. Anxiety coiled inside her as she approached the security desk, where a uniformed guard eyed her warily. "I need to speak to someone on the board," she said, clutching her purse strap so tightly her fingers turned white. "Miss," the guard replied, shifting on his feet, "you're not on the access list anymore, I'm sorry." She shot a pleading look. Just 5 minutes with a board member, or Mr. Nelson, the CEO, or anyone. Please." He took in her tense face and sighed. "I'll see if someone's available, but you have to wait in the lobby." Reluctantly, she nodded and moved to a stiff leather bench near the glass doors. Minutes crawled by as she listened to the beep of employee badges. People hurried in and out, sipping lattes, scanning their phones, occasionally tossing her sympathetic or puzzled looks. Caitlin felt each second like a hammer driving her deeper into desperation. Finally, the elevator chimed and Paula stepped out. Her eyes lit up with worry when she spotted Caitlin. She made a beeline over, pulling her aside behind a large potted plant. "Are you out of your mind?" she whispered, scanning the lobby for eavesdroppers. "Duarte and his buddies are furious after yesterday. They're just waiting to make sure you stay gone." "I can't just vanish," Caitlin insisted. "This is all I have. My grandmother, her medication, her bills." Her voice trembled with unspoken fears. "I at least need to clear my name." Paula squeezed her arm gently. "Let me try something. Stay here." She hurried off, slipping into the elevator again with a determined look. Caitlin could only guess she was going upstairs to plead Caitlin's case. As she waited, the guard glanced at her apologetically. Time seemed to drag, each passing moment a reminder of how powerless she felt. Yet the documents in her purse gave her a faint surge of hope. If someone with authority would just read them, maybe she could get her job back or at least avoid a legal nightmare. Eventually, Paula returned, jaw set, frustration plain on her face. "Nobody's agreeing to meet you," she said under her breath. "They're in a board session. That's all the receptionist would say." Caitlin sighed. "I have to try another way then." Paula squeezed her hand. "Look, I overheard them talking about Sheikh Ibrahim's visit. They're all on edge. If you can't get through to the board, maybe you can find a lawyer who'll take your case before it's final. Or—" She hesitated as if torn, then leaned in closer. "Or get to the Sheikh himself. I heard he hates corruption. If he realizes what they've done, it might force them to listen." Caitlin's heart fluttered with a burst of optimism. "But how do I reach him without getting thrown out again?" Paula shook her head. "I don't know. Just be careful." Her voice dropped low. "And watch your back." Before Caitlin could answer, the guard cleared his throat, signaling that her time was up in the lobby. Paula offered a small, encouraging smile before slipping away, blending into the ocean of employees heading to the elevator banks. Outside, midday sunlight glared off the pavement, making Caitlin squint. Disappointment weighed on her, but she refused to let it choke her resolve. She fished her phone from her purse and dialed a pro bono legal clinic that someone had recommended. The line rang and rang, a tinny jingle echoing in her ear until a tired-sounding receptionist answered. "I can't promise any immediate legal counsel," the receptionist said flatly. "We have a long wait list, and we're short-staffed. It might be weeks." Caitlin swallowed her frustration. "I don't have weeks. This is urgent." "I'm sorry," came the reply, and the line went dead. She stared at her phone, feeling the sting of tears. The building across the street looked impossibly tall, as if mocking her smallness. Her thoughts roared with solutions that fizzled as quickly as they formed. She remembered Paula's words. "Watch your back." Fear nudged its way in. What if these people really would do anything to keep her silent? She forced herself to push past the worry and caught a cab home. The driver's radio chatter filled the cramped space, references to the upcoming arrival of an influential sheikh from the Middle East drifting into her mind. She couldn't help but listen, realizing the entire city was abuzz about this visit, not just her former company. Once the cab pulled up in front of her modest house, she realized the weight of the day had drained her. She dragged herself to the front door, the hinges creaking in protest as she stepped inside. Her grandmother's soft call reached her from the little living room. "How was it?" she asked, voice gentle and concerned. Caitlin mustered a small smile, sitting down on the faded sofa beside her grandmother's armchair. "No luck. They refused to see me." Her grandmother patted her hand. "I wish I could help more. You know I'd do anything, but right now You focus on getting better." Caitlin cut in tenderly, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. She looked around the tiny space they shared, noticing the chipped paint on the walls and the outdated curtains. It wasn't much, but it was home, and losing it would break her grandmother's heart. Later, the sky turned from pale orange to deep purple outside the living room window, and Caitlin's phone lit up again. She answered, expecting maybe Paula with some new tip, but instead a harsh, distorted voice hissed across the line, "Stop digging around or you'll regret it." Her entire body went cold. "Who is this?" she whispered, though she doubted she'd get an answer. A low chuckle crackled before the call abruptly ended. She stared at the phone for a long moment, adrenaline surging through her. Someone was clearly watching her. Someone knew she was still fighting. Her chest felt tight as she replayed Paula's warning over and over. These people aren't messing around. Her grandmother dozed in her chair, blissfully unaware of the phone call's unnerving threat. Still trembling, Caitlin reached over and pulled a blanket up around the older woman's shoulders, careful not to wake her. She caught sight of the bills stacked on a side table: rent, medication costs, overdue notices. Letting fear win now would mean losing everything. She stood up, retreating to the small corner that served as her living area. The lamp on the end table glowed softly, reflecting off the framed photos of happier days when her grandmother was healthier and Caitlin's future felt secure. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, city lights flickering against the windows. The phone felt heavy in her hand. She tightened her grip, jaw set in determination. If these people thought a threatening call would make her back down, they were wrong. Her grandmother was too important. Her own future, too precious. She gently rested the phone on the table and stood silently for a moment, letting the tension swirl in the stillness around her. Taking one last glance at the menacing text of the unknown caller in her phone's history, she inhaled, squared her shoulders, and promised herself she wouldn't let them intimidate her. Even if she had no lawyer on her side, no official support, she had the truth and a reason worth fighting for. Caitlin stands in her tiny living room, phone in hand, heart pounding after the menacing call. She decides, come morning, she'll face whatever awaits her at the corporate offices, no matter the cost. Caitlin rose before dawn, determined to make good on the promise she had whispered to herself the night before. She checked on her grandmother, sleeping peacefully, wrapped in a faded blanket, then slipped outside and hurried to the bus stop. The cold morning air stung her cheeks, adding urgency to her every breath. Despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach, she felt a spark of hope. The mysterious Sheikh Ibrahim would arrive today. Maybe, just maybe, he would be the key to unraveling the whole scheme that had cost her so much. By the time she reached the towering corporate building, the sun was just beginning to splash the sky with pale gold. Nervous employees swept past her in brisk clusters. Some looked puzzled by her presence, recalling that she was no longer on the payroll. She ignored their stares, ducking past the security desk before anyone could stop her. Though her pulse thudded, she managed to slip into a nearby corridor that offered a partial view of the main lobby. The hush in the building's entrance struck her as odd at first. Usually people chatted or typed on phones while waiting for the workday to begin. Today, however, many employees were pressed against the windows, scanning the street outside. A thrill of electricity ran through the air. Word had spread quickly that Sheikh Ibrahim's entourage was on its way. Caitlin, half concealed behind a potted plant near an unoccupied reception desk, watched the drama unfolding. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the front doors, followed by two more expensive cars that gleamed in the early sunlight. The hush turned into a collective intake of breath. Those near the windows peered closer. A small group of high-ranking executives, including Mr. Duarte, rushed to the entrance. They wore forced smiles and anxious expressions. Clearly, the Sheikh's visit was no routine check-in. Caitlin craned her neck to see what was happening. Then the front doors slid open, revealing Sheikh Ibrahim. He appeared a little taller than most around him, with a dignified bearing that lent him a quiet presence. He wore a crisp, modern suit accented by subtle Middle Eastern details, a pristine white shirt and a striking, understated scarf that marked his heritage. Caitlin felt a stab of curiosity. This was the man she hoped might believe her story. The directors practically fell over themselves to greet him. She recognized Mr. Duarte's tense smile, a far cry from the cold hostility he'd shown her. Next to him stood a few other high-level executives who nodded vigorously each time the Sheikh spoke. Ibrahim listened politely, a mild expression on his face, but Caitlin noticed the swiftness with which his gaze swept the lobby. He seemed to register every detail, the staff, the building's design, the swarm of directors crowding him. The group moved deeper into the lobby, and Caitlin caught her first clear glimpse of Sheikh Ibrahim's features. He had a keen, calm look in his eyes, as though he was used to analyzing people with a single glance. Her heart pounded. If there was any chance of exposing the injustice she'd suffered, it was now or never. She took a steadying breath and stepped forward. Immediately, 2 security guards positioned themselves as obstacles blocking her path. She froze, feeling their imposing presence. One guard gestured for her to move aside. For a split second, doubt gnawed at her. Could she really push through? Then she thought of her grandmother at home. Her resolve hardened, and she cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said firmly. "I need to speak with Mr. Ibrahim. Just a moment of his time." The guards crossed their arms. "Ma'am, please move aside." She inhaled. "I have something important to show him. It involves corporate fraud." Hearing her raised voice, a few employees turned to look. Mr. Duarte did too. His expression instantly soured when he recognized her, and his upper lip curled. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, striding toward her. "You're trespassing." "I have the right to be heard," Caitlin retorted, lifting her chin. "I was fired without cause. There are documents." She had her hand in her purse, ready to pull out the envelope. Before she could finish, Mr. Duarte snapped his fingers at security. "Remove her, now!" The guards moved in. One reached out, trying to usher Caitlin away, but in that moment, she felt something shift behind them. She looked up to see Sheikh Ibrahim regarding the commotion with sharp, assessing eyes. He raised a hand, a subtle but commanding gesture that made the guards hesitate. "Let her speak," he said, voice measured yet authoritative. The guards stepped back, instantly deferring to him. Around them, the cluster of directors watched tensely, annoyance flickering over their faces. With her heart in her throat, Caitlin stepped forward, envelope in hand. She extended it to Ibrahim, her voice low and urgent. "I have proof of wrongdoing by certain directors. I know you're here to review some big investment. Please, you need to see this before they destroy everything." Mr. Duarte flashed a furious glare at her, as though wishing he could force her into silence. But Sheikh Ibrahim accepted the envelope, slipping it under his arm with a polite nod. Before Caitlin could continue, a phone rang somewhere in the lobby. An assistant hurried over, holding out a device to the Sheikh, who pressed it to his ear with an apologetic look. "I'm afraid I must take this," Ibrahim said, stepping aside. Caitlin recognized the ring of a distant voice speaking in another language, possibly an urgent matter from overseas. The Sheikh listened intently, answering in quiet tones. Mr. Duarte seized the opportunity. "We're very sorry about this inconvenience," he said to Ibrahim, forcing a smooth grin. "We'll ensure this individual doesn't disrupt your visit any further." The Sheikh glanced up, his phone call still in progress. He caught Caitlin's eye again, and for an instant she thought she saw concern flicker in his expression. Then his attention returned to the conversation on the phone. One of the other executives stepped in, gesturing for Ibrahim to follow him upstairs, presumably to a scheduled meeting. 2 more guards approached Caitlin. This time she knew resisting was pointless. The Sheikh was busy, and she had managed to hand him the documents. At least that much was done. She allowed the guards to escort her through the lobby, Mr. Duarte's scowl trailing after her. Once outside, she stood on the sidewalk, her pulse racing, Wondering if her frantic attempt had made any impact, she retreated to a nearby cafe, a small place with a chalkboard menu and row of tiny tables near the window. She found an empty seat and sank into it, her mind buzzing. She had given Sheikh Ibrahim the envelope, but would that be enough to convince him? Or would the directors twist the facts and bury her accusations? A steady rain started to patter against the windows, matching her uncertain mood. She sipped a lukewarm cup of coffee, replaying the moment she looked into the Sheikh's eyes. His expression hadn't been cold or dismissive. He hadn't recoiled or scoffed. He seemed open, curious, like he genuinely wanted to know more. That alone gave her a spark of hope. Eventually, she left the cafe and walked home in a drizzle, her mind swirling with questions. Should she have fought harder to speak with him? Would the envelope's contents be enough to pique his interest? Fear slipped in. Maybe the directors would find a way to explain it all away. Even worse, perhaps they would strike back at her again for daring to return and confront them. She reached her front door, soaked from the rain and exhausted. Her grandmother was resting, so Caitlin quietly changed into dry clothes and tried to settle her racing thoughts. Across the room, her purse sat on a wooden chair, significantly lighter now that the envelope was gone. She reminded herself that she'd done all she could at the moment. With no money, no official lawyer, and looming threats, she had placed her fragile hope in the hands of a man she barely knew. High above, in the gleaming top floor of the corporate tower, Sheikh Ibrahim held Caitlin's envelope in his lap while the directors gave a polished presentation on quarterly earnings. His eyes flicked periodically to the folder, listening with half an ear as he debated when to open it. Eventually, his curiosity won. He discreetly broke the seal, removing the pages inside. Suspicious emails, references to unaccounted funds, questionable sign-offs. He recognized the flavor of corruption all too well. His gaze lifted as Mr. Duarte finished speaking. "This is most impressive," Ibrahim said, voice calm, though his mind churned. "I do see some anomalies in the figures, however. Perhaps you can clarify." Mr. Duarte exchanged a tense look with his colleagues. "We'll have our finance team check those, probably just clerical errors," he said, smiling stiffly. Ibrahim nodded. "Clerical errors, yes. Sometimes those happen." He let his gaze drift to the window, taking in the sprawling city beyond. But in his mind, he pictured Caitlin's urgency, the desperate set of her jaw, the way she'd insisted there was more at stake. When the meeting ended, the directors filed out quickly, eager to avoid lingering questions. Ibrahim stood by the window, a silent storm of thoughts swirling within him. He was not a man who liked to be deceived. The tension in the company, the fired employee who risked embarrassing herself in front of security, none of it added up to a harmless misunderstanding. Ibrahim steps away from the conference room, instructions swirling in his mind. He orders his personal assistant to find that woman, determined to uncover the truth. Early morning light slipped through the thin curtains of Caitlin's cramped living room. She blinked groggily, stirring from a fitful sleep on the worn sofa. The previous days played over in her mind, her frantic attempt to speak with Sheikh Ibrahim, the suspicious stares from the directors, and the tension that clung to the air like storm clouds. She rubbed her eyes and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Suddenly, a soft knock echoed from the front door. She froze, heart thumping. Visitors were rare, especially at this hour. Rising slowly, she tiptoed across the small space, careful not to wake her grandmother resting in the adjacent room. She opened the door a crack, half expecting more bad news. Instead, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a polite smile stood there. She wore a neatly tailored blazer, hair pulled back in a smooth twist, and carried a small leather folder under one arm. "Caitlin Morgan?" the woman asked, her voice quiet and measured. "That's me," Caitlin said, gripping the doorknob. She glanced warily at the folder, her mind flashing with possibilities of new threats or legal documents. "Who are you?" "I'm Lara," the woman answered gently. "Sheikh Ibrahim's personal assistant." May I come in for a moment? Caitlin exhaled, a hint of relief and curiosity mingling in her chest. She nodded, stepping back to allow Lara into the cluttered living area. The assistant's gaze swept over the modest furniture and faded wallpaper, but she made no comment. Caitlin offered her a seat, shifting a couple of books and an extra blanket aside. "I'm sorry about the mess," Caitlin murmured. "Coffee? I don't have much, but—" "Coffee would be lovely," Lara said, resting the leather folder on her lap. "Thank you." Caitlin busied herself by the small kitchen counter, trying to steady her nerves. She found clean cups and filled them with hot coffee, then placed them on the rickety table. For a brief moment, the smell was comforting. It reminded her of calmer times, mornings when she'd head to work with a sense of purpose instead of dread. Lara took a sip and cleared her throat. The Sheikh was concerned about what happened at the company's lobby. He received your envelope. He believes you may hold vital information about certain irregularities. You risked a lot to give it to him. Caitlin felt a tightness in her chest. I didn't know what else to do. Nobody would listen, and I've already lost my job because of it. Lara nodded in understanding. We've started reviewing the evidence you provided. It's serious. The Sheikh wants to know exactly what you know. He suspects a group of directors has been hiding financial misconduct, but we need a clearer picture to act decisively. Caitlin glanced at the closed door to her grandmother's room, then back at Lara. I've uncovered emails, transaction records, things that point to embezzlement. I just can't prove who's at the center of it all. But I suspect Mr. Duarte and a few others. They're going after me with everything they've got. I don't have money for lawyers. And my grandmother. Her voice wavered. She needs constant care. We can't force the Sheikh's involvement in private legal battles, but he's not indifferent, Lara said gently, watching Caitlin closely. He has the resources to investigate further. He's determined to see if these directors are compromising his investment. Caitlin felt an unexpected surge of hope. I'd do anything to clear my name and stop them from hurting more people. If it means talking to the Sheikh again, I will. Lara placed a slim business card on the table. Call me anytime if you have more evidence or if you feel threatened. I'll do my best to relay everything directly to him. They finished their coffee with subdued conversation, Caitlin occasionally eyeing the hallway to make sure her grandmother didn't wake. Finally, Lara stood to leave. We'll be in touch, she said, offering a small, encouraging smile. After closing the door behind her, Caitlin leaned against it for a few seconds, letting out a shaky breath. A glimmer of optimism warmed her chest, though she knew the worst might still be ahead. She tucked Lara's card into a drawer, hoping it would be a lifeline. She went to check on her grandmother, who was now awake, propped up on pillows. Her fragile frame looked even smaller against the large cushions. Morning, Nana, Caitlin said softly, helping her sip a cup of water. How are you feeling? I'm all right, her grandmother replied in a thin voice. Just a bit dizzy. I'm sorry I can't do more around here. Don't talk like that, Caitlin scolded gently. She adjusted the blanket, hiding the deep worry building inside. The hospital bills stacked on the nightstand were an inescapable reminder of their precarious situation. Hoping to keep her grandmother's spirits up, she forced a smile and stepped outside for a moment of fresh air, shutting the door softly behind her. In the narrow patch of yard, she inhaled deeply. The day was bright, but the future still felt uncertain. She told herself she couldn't afford to give in to fear. Her phone buzzed, cutting through the quiet. The screen showed Paula's name. Hey, Caitlin answered, adjusting her voice to mask her tension. Are you okay? Paula asked, sounding equally on edge. I just overheard something big. The company's legal team is preparing to accuse you of stealing those confidential emails. They want to pin the blame on you for unauthorized access. Caitlin's stomach lurched. I can't believe they'd go that far. They're desperate. They know Sheikh Ibrahim is suspicious, and they want to make sure they discredit you before you can do more damage. I have no idea how to defend myself, Caitlin admitted, her voice barely steady. I haven't got the money for a decent lawyer. Just hold on, Paula said. I'll call you back if I learn anything else. With that, the line went dead, leaving Caitlin with a hammering pulse. Despite the heavy news, she resolved not to crumble. She spent the afternoon scanning for any pro bono attorney leads, making phone calls. Eventually, she landed a meeting with someone from a small law office who agreed to see her for free, but they didn't sound too enthusiastic. She arrived at their building, a shabby one-story office with a flickering neon sign. Inside, a tired-looking lawyer led her to a cramped back room. The conversation felt tense from the start. He explained how the company's case could bury her under legal fees and potential criminal charges if she couldn't prove the data was legitimately hers to share. "But they're the ones committing fraud," Caitlin exclaimed, voice trembling. "I can't afford to sit back and let them win." The lawyer tapped a pen on his desk. "If you don't have ironclad evidence or a wealthy sponsor, you're facing an uphill battle. I advise settling or at least avoiding direct confrontation until you've secured more resources. Otherwise—" Caitlin rose abruptly, cheeks flushed. "Thanks for your time," she managed, forcing the words out. She refused to listen to any more defeatist talk. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement, mirroring her apprehension about what lay ahead. By nightfall, she found herself inside the company's deserted parking garage, heart pounding in her ears. Paula had arranged to meet her there after hours, claiming she'd unearthed additional files. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered, creating an eerie echo for their hurried footsteps. "Over here!" Paula hissed, crouched behind a concrete pillar. She extended a small USB stick. "These are backups of old transaction logs, enough to suggest someone's been siphoning funds offshore. If the Sheikh's team digs deeper, this could be gold." Caitlin carefully pocketed the USB. "Paula, you're risking everything. Are you sure?" Her friend looked pale but resolute. "I can't stand by. You're in this mess because you tried to do the right thing. If they fire me too, so be it." Before Caitlin could respond, footsteps echoed through the garage. She and Paula ducked behind a row of cars, hearts hammering. Two security guards passed by, their flashlights slicing through the shadows. Caitlin held her breath until the beams disappeared around a corner. The tension left her shaky, but she managed to pull Paula up and guide her toward the exit. They parted ways with hushed goodbyes, nerves on edge. Meanwhile, in a posh hotel suite across town, Sheikh Ibrahim sat at a polished wood desk, papers fanned out before him. He studied the documents Caitlin had given him, along with new details from his own analysts. His brow creased as he recognized a pattern: large sums of money unaccounted for, forged signatures. The sense of betrayal sank in deeper. He had invested trust in these directors, and it appeared they were exploiting his name for their schemes. He picked up his phone, instructing Lara to schedule a private meeting with Caitlin. Whatever the outcome, he couldn't let these crimes remain hidden, nor could he ignore the bravery of the young woman who had risked everything to bring it to his attention. Late that night, Caitlin returned home, exhausted but clinging to the idea that help might finally be in reach. She tiptoed into her grandmother's room and sat on the edge of the bed, explaining in hushed tones that the Sheikh's assistant had visited, that help might be on the horizon. Her grandmother's eyes gleamed with gentle faith. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, voice rasping with fatigue. "Don't lose hope. You're fighting for more than just yourself." The words bolstered Caitlin's spirits. She kissed her grandmother's brow and retreated to the silent living room, turning on a dim lamp. Just then, her phone rang. The unknown number displayed on the screen made her pulse spike. Against her better judgment, she answered. A low, cold voice whispered, "Back off, or you'll regret it." Her grip tightened around the device, a chill coursing through her veins. She swallowed, feeling the weight of the USB in her pocket and recalling the legal threats piling up. This wasn't a game. It was a battle with real stakes. Her thoughts spun as the line went dead, leaving nothing but hollow silence in its wake. Caitlin clutches the phone, terrified by the threat. She looks at the newest evidence in her hand, uncertainty battling with determination in her eyes. Caitlin took several moments to compose herself after the threatening phone call. Her hands still trembled, and the echoes of that cold, menacing voice refused to fade from her ears. She switched off the lamp in the living room, not wanting the bright light to invite prying eyes, then stood motionless, letting the darkness calm her nerves. If they thought scaring her would make her retreat, they were wrong. She had no choice but to push forward. Morning came with rays of pale sunlight creeping through the window. Despite her restless night, she rose early, gathered the documents and the USB Paula had given her, then rushed to the small corner of the kitchen where her phone lay. Scrolling through her contacts, she found Lara's number, the personal assistant to Sheikh Ibrahim who had visited her home days before. Summoning her courage, she dialed. Lara answered in a brisk but polite tone. "Yes, Caitlin?" Caitlin steadied her voice. "I've received another threat. I don't know what else these people might do. If it's possible, I need to talk to the Sheikh in person, where we can't be overheard." A brief silence crackled over the line. Then Lara spoke again, her voice more somber. "I understand. I'll see if the Sheikh can arrange a private meeting. Give me a few hours." With that, the call ended. Caitlin set the phone down, exhaling shakily. A dozen worries buzzed in her mind. How much time did she have before the directors made another move? She glanced at her grandmother's closed door, a fresh wave of urgency surging inside her. An hour later, while she was fixing a light breakfast, tea and soft bread, her phone buzzed again. "He'll meet you at the cafe near Burrow Street, 11 sharp," Lara said simply. "We've requested they reserve a small private area in the back. Be discreet on your way there." Caitlin thanked her and got ready. She dressed in dark jeans and a casual jacket, hoping not to attract attention. Before leaving, she checked on her grandmother, who was propped up on pillows and reading an old magazine. Though her grandmother tried to smile in reassurance, Caitlin couldn't help noticing how pale she looked. "You be careful, child," her grandmother said softly. "There's danger in the air." "I'll be fine," Caitlin promised, kissing her forehead. The tenderness of the moment strengthened her resolve. She left the house, taking a crowded bus to avoid suspicion. Her mind churned with anxiety the entire ride, worried she might be followed. Every stranger's gaze felt like a threat. When the bus rattled to a stop near Burrow Street, she slipped out and crossed the road, scanning the sidewalks for anything suspicious. The cafe came into view, a small, unassuming place with faded lettering on its sign. A barista behind the counter welcomed her in a friendly tone, and Caitlin asked if a private booth had been reserved. The barista nodded, directing her to a curtained nook at the rear. Heart pounding, she passed a few patrons sipping lattes, feeling a prickling sensation at the back of her neck that made her glance around. Beyond the curtain, Sheikh Ibrahim rose to greet her, offering a courteous incline of his head. He wore a tailored suit in a subdued shade of gray, and the gentle lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of both confidence and concern. She noticed Lara standing off to one side, discreetly scanning the surroundings. "Thank you for coming," Ibrahim said softly, gesturing to the small table. "Please have a seat." Caitlin sank into the chair opposite him. Despite the swirl of dread in her gut, she felt a glimmer of relief. At least he had shown up, and he seemed genuinely willing to listen. "I appreciate you giving me your time," she said quietly. "I'm sure you're busy." The Sheikh folded his hands. "I've reviewed what you provided. Embezzlement and fraud appear more than likely. But I need the whole story from your perspective. How you discovered it, who you suspect, and why they targeted you." Caitlin's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she found courage in the memory of the phone threats. She told him everything: her early suspicions of financial tampering, the conflicting documents, her friend Paula's help in uncovering hidden transactions, the intimidation from Mr. Duarte. She painted a picture of the mounting bills for her grandmother's medical care and how losing her job had left them both in a precarious place. Ibrahim listened intently, occasionally jotting notes on a small notepad. His gaze never left her face, and she got the sense he was not only hearing her words but weighing her sincerity. When she finished, he pressed his lips together in a grave line. "It's worse than I feared," he said. "If what you're describing is true, the directors have been funneling my funds into illegitimate channels. I can't allow that to continue." He signaled to Lara, who stepped forward with a businesslike expression. "We've begun investigating," she said, her voice poised. "Some initial data supports your claims. The question is how we expose it effectively and protect you at the same time." Caitlin nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. "Protection matters," she admitted. "I've received threats. They even hinted at going after my grandmother." Ibrahim's eyes hardened. "That won't happen. I won't permit such acts to stand. Let's be clear, though. If you do this, you're putting yourself in the crosshairs of powerful people. We'll do our best to shield you, but it may be a turbulent path." She swallowed, remembering her grandmother's frail figure and the looming medical bills. But she also recalled the sense of injustice that had pushed her this far. "I don't have a choice anymore," she said, voice trembling. "Either I fight or they destroy me, and my grandmother needs me to be strong." A moment of silence passed, filled with the hum of the cafe's machinery on the other side of the curtain. At last, Ibrahim rose, extending his hand. "Then let's proceed," he said. "I'll dig deeper into the company's records, call for a thorough audit. In the meantime, keep a low profile and gather anything else that can help us." Caitlin stood as well. "Thank you," she whispered, shaking his hand. Relief and anxiety mingled in her chest, a sense that she'd gained an ally, but also a bigger target on her back. Before they parted, Ibrahim reached into his coat pocket and produced a slim envelope. "For your grandmother's immediate needs," he said gently. "I know it's not a permanent fix, but it should cover her medication for a while." She hesitated, tears pricking at her eyes, then accepted the envelope. "I'll pay you back," she managed. "Somehow." His expression softened, though he said nothing more. With a final nod, he and Lara exited the cafe, leaving Caitlin to sit down again for a moment, the envelope trembling in her hands. Part of her felt uneasy accepting help, but desperation had left her with few options. After she settled her nerves, she stepped outside. The sky had darkened with gathering clouds, and a crisp wind tugged at her jacket. She spotted a glossy black car parked across the street, windows tinted so deeply she couldn't see inside. The engine idled, a telltale hum reaching her ears. An uncomfortable suspicion seized her. It might be someone sent by the directors, watching her every move. Her heart pounded, but she walked calmly down the block, weaving into the flow of pedestrians. She resisted the urge to look back, determined not to tip them off that she'd noticed. Eventually, she caught a bus heading toward her neighborhood. The entire ride, she glanced warily through the window. She saw no sign of the black car, but her unease lingered. Upon arriving home, she rushed inside. The house felt cooler than normal, and an uneasy silence pressed against her ears. "Nana?" she called, hurrying toward her grandmother's room. Relief washed over her to find the older woman dozing, apparently unharmed. She gently adjusted the blanket, feeling guilty for her moment of panic. Just as she was about to leave the bedroom, a strange smell drifted through the air, something singed and bitter. Confused, she followed it down the hallway toward the small laundry area. Her pulse hammered as the smell grew stronger. She flipped on a light, scanning the corners until her eyes landed on a patch of blackened wires near the fuse box. Soot marked the wall, and a pile of melted plastic clung to the floor. Shock gripped her. The wiring looked deliberately tampered with. A short circuit could have sparked a blaze, potentially engulfing the entire house in flames. It was by sheer luck that the fire had died out. Her fingers shook as she reached for the singed remains, the reality of the situation crashing down on her like a cold wave. Caitlin arrives at her grandmother's house to find the aftermath of the fire, staring at the blackened wires in shock. She recognizes this was no accident and wonders if she's running out of time. Caitlin stood frozen in front of the damaged fuse box, the acrid smell of burned plastic still hanging in the air. The blackened wires told a story of their own. Someone had tampered with them, leaving her grandmother's life in grave danger. She could almost feel the echoes of heat that had charred the wall and singed the floor, imagining how much worse it might have been if the flames had spread. Her first thought was to check on her grandmother. She rushed back into the small bedroom where the older woman was now awake, confusion written across her face. Caitlin approached gently, placing a hand on her grandmother's frail arm. "There was a small electrical fire," she said, voice quivering. "But it's out now. Are you okay?" Her grandmother nodded, brows knitted with concern. "I'm fine, dear. I heard a strange noise in the night, but I was too tired to get up." She gave Caitlin a worried look. "Are you sure it's all over?" "Yes," Caitlin said softly, even though a knot of anxiety twisted in her stomach. It was definitely not all over. The danger was closing in. "I'll call the police. Let them know something suspicious happened." She eased her grandmother back against the pillows, assuring her she'd be safe, then retrieved her phone. The police arrived more than an hour later, 2 uniformed officers who surveyed the damage and jotted down notes. They took photos of the wires, but their questions were brief, generic, and ended with a lukewarm promise. "We'll open a file and see what we can find. Let us know if anything else happens." Caitlin felt a pang of frustration as the cruiser pulled away. There was no guarantee they'd unearth the truth anytime soon, not with so little evidence and bigger cases on their plate. And with the company's directors hovering in the background, she doubted they'd leave any clear trail. When the dust had settled, her grandmother dozed off from the stress, leaving Caitlin alone in the tiny living room. The place felt more claustrophobic than usual, every corner reminding her how vulnerable they were. She paced, running a hand through her hair. Could she afford a private security guard? Absolutely not. She had barely enough money for her grandmother's medication, though Ibrahim's envelope had eased some of that burden. The buzz of her phone snapped her back to reality. She grabbed it, noticing a new text from Paula. "They filed a lawsuit, civil case, says you sabotaged company data. I'm sorry." Caitlin's eyes skimmed the words again and again, her heart hammering. A lawsuit? After everything they'd done to her, the directors were now coming for her legally, accusing her of the very thing she was trying to expose. She sank onto the couch, head in her hands. The weight of it all felt suffocating, the threats, the fire, and now this lawsuit piling on top. She realized she needed help, desperately. Gathering herself, she grabbed a thin jacket and stepped into the crisp afternoon air. The bus ride to a small legal aid center took the better part of an hour, leaving her anxious the whole way. She couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on her, even among the crowded seats. Inside, she found a modest office space with mismatched chairs and stacks of paperwork on every desk. An old friend from school, now volunteering here, recognized her and beckoned her over. He listened patiently as she laid out the lawsuit, the tampered wires, and her suspicion of high-level corruption. He blew out a long breath. "This is heavy. I can file some responses for you, but it won't hold forever. You need concrete proof. Not just pieces. Everything. The burden of proof is on you, since they're claiming you stole data or falsified emails. Can you get more evidence?" "I have some," she said quietly, thinking of the documents Paula had passed along and the leads from Ibrahim. But she still felt uncertain if it was enough. "I'm working on it." He looked sympathetic, though his eyes were laced with worry. "You'll need it soon. Courts rarely side with someone who can't fund a proper defense, especially if the other side has powerful lawyers." She forced a nod, thanked him, and left, feeling the sting of desperation. Outside, the sky had turned a cloudy gray, reflecting her mood. She checked her phone on the way back, half hoping for good news or a sign that things were turning around. Instead, she found a delivery notice from the local florist, claiming a bouquet had been left at her door. Confused, she hurried home, entering with caution. Resting on the small table by the front door was a cluster of delicate lilies, still fresh with droplets of water. Her grandmother's face lit up from her armchair, the sweet fragrance already filling the tiny living room. "Those arrived about 15 minutes ago," she said, smiling at the sight of something beautiful in their drab surroundings. Caitlin searched for a note and found a simple card tucked among the blossoms. "For your grandmother's swift recovery. Ibrahim." Her chest tightened at the unexpected gesture. It was the first time anyone had done something so thoughtful for her grandmother besides Caitlin herself. She felt a glimmer of warmth amid the swirling chaos in her life. It felt strange and comforting all at once. Her grandmother motioned for her to read the note. After scanning it, Caitlin handed it over with a small, grateful smile. The older woman's eyes shone, and she placed the card gently on the side table. "That was kind of him," she said, her voice still weak, but touched by the gesture. Caitlin carefully arranged the lilies in a vase, letting her fingers brush their soft petals. She realized just how much she was starting to trust Ibrahim, his sincerity, his calm presence, and the steady way he'd promised to help. It was a jarring contrast to the fear-laced threats she'd received from the directors and their goons, but as she stared at the lilies, a pang of worry coursed through her. She couldn't allow her guard to drop. The stakes were too high. That night she received a text from Paula suggesting another nocturnal rendezvous at the company building. There were physical records dating back years, stored in a deserted office floor, and Paula believed more incriminating files could be found there. Caitlin didn't relish the idea of sneaking around again, but she couldn't say no. Not when her entire future hinged on exposing the truth. The building loomed under the glow of security lights, long after most employees had gone. Paula met her in the shadows, face drawn and lips pressed tight with tension. "We need to hurry," she whispered. "If they catch us, we're done for." Caitlin followed her down a dim corridor, the hush magnified by the emptiness. In a back room crammed with old filing cabinets, they clicked on a single flashlight, scanning rows of labeled boxes. Dust motes danced in the thin beam of light as they rifled through old financial statements and archived communications. Their heartbeats quickened at every slight sound. Then came the distinct echo of footsteps. The two women exchanged terrified glances, ducking behind a tall row of cabinets. They crouched on the cold floor, flashlights off, breath caught in their throats. The footsteps drew closer, then paused, as though someone was listening for movement. Time stretched. Caitlin felt each pulsing beat of her heart. She pictured her grandmother alone at home, the memory of the tampered wires slicing through her thoughts. If they were found here, it might all be over. Her grandmother's safety, her chance at clearing her name, everything. At last, the footsteps receded into silence. When they dared to breathe again, Paula clicked the flashlight back on, rummaging through the last box. She yanked out a stack of receipts and sign-off forms, eyes gleaming with triumph. "Look, this may connect bank accounts overseas, enough to prove they've diverted funds." They wasted no time slipping out the same way they'd come, hearts pounding the whole way. Once safely in the street, Paula pressed the papers into Caitlin's hands. "Hide these, make copies, do whatever you have to do." Caitlin nodded, gratefully hugging her friend in the lamplit darkness. "Thank you," she whispered, voice thick with relief and anxiety. Then they hurried off in separate directions, determined not to draw attention. An hour later, Caitlin's phone rang. It was Ibrahim, his tone gentle and questioning. "I've been worried. Are you all right?" She paused, leaning against a lamppost, feeling the documents pressed tight against her ribs in a folder. "I'm okay. I just got something that could change everything, but it's dangerous, and I'm—" Her voice trembled. "I understand." If you need a safe place for you or your grandmother, I can arrange that, he offered. I'd rather you were both secure than constantly on edge. She found herself battling a surge of emotion. The mere suggestion that someone would shelter them felt almost too good to be true. After a slight hesitation, she whispered, "I'll think about it. Thank you." Her voice carried a quiet sincerity, and she hung up feeling both comforted and unsettled by how much trust she was placing in him. By the time she finally stepped through her front door, it was deep into the night. Her grandmother slept peacefully, the lilies still filling the air with their sweet, calming scent. Caitlin rested a hand on the older woman's shoulder, silently praying they'd weather this storm. Outside, the wind rattled the window, an ominous reminder that danger still lurked. Weary but too anxious to sleep, she set the newly acquired documents on the kitchen table, planning how best to use them. The anxiety only deepened when a thud by the door caught her attention. She looked around, half expecting another intrusion, but found only a thick envelope lying on the welcome mat, delivered by hand, it seemed. Heart in her throat, she retrieved it and pulled out a folded letter. Her eyes skimmed over the words, panic leaping into her chest. It bore the company's letterhead, official and intimidating. They were ordering her to appear in court soon to face the sabotage charges. The date printed at the top was disturbingly close, a mere week away. She felt the blood rush from her face as she realized time was running out, and no matter how much evidence she collected, it might not be enough without a proper defense. She clenched the letter, her pulse roaring in her ears. Caitlin holds the lawyer's letter, anxiety mounting. She reads the date, only a week away, realizing she must gather ironclad proof or lose everything. Caitlin woke the next day with a fierce resolve burning beneath her exhaustion. The court date, now looming just days away, propelled her forward like a clock ticking in the back of her mind. She spent the early morning hours poring over the documents that Paula had risked so much to secure, piecing together details that could strengthen her defense. Despite her nerves, she knew there was no room left for hesitation. Midway through sorting files, her phone buzzed with a text from Ibrahim. "I have more leads. Meet me at the downtown library." Relief flooded her. His support felt like a life raft in a stormy sea. She made sure her grandmother was comfortable, then hurried out, documents tucked securely in a slim folder pressed to her side. The downtown library rose before her, a quiet haven of polished floors and tall shelves. In a discreet reading room, she spotted Ibrahim waiting, dressed in his usual understated but elegant fashion. He offered a gentle nod of greeting, gesturing for her to sit at a table strewn with newspapers and financial records. "I've been going through more of the company's files," he said softly, leaning closer so their voices wouldn't echo. "Between what we've gathered and my accountant's observations, the threads of corruption are more extensive than I first suspected." Caitlin's stomach clenched. "So it's not just Duarte?" He shook his head. "He's definitely central, but a few high-level employees are in on it. It appears they've laundered funds through multiple subsidiaries, some of which I indirectly own. They're trying to hide it all under the company's success, and your whistleblowing has them desperate." She exhaled slowly, remembering the threatening calls and the fire that nearly consumed her home. "We have to expose them before I end up in front of a judge with only half a story." He gave a slight nod and tapped a newspaper article on the table. Headlines hinted at scandal in the making, and anonymous sources reveal possible corporate fraud. Caitlin's eyes widened. The media was circling, hungry for any scraps of the story. Ibrahim folded the paper thoughtfully. "We should move quickly. If we wait too long, they'll discredit you further, especially since they're claiming you sabotaged the company from within. With public opinion on their side, a courtroom can be very unforgiving." Caitlin's heart pounded. "Then let's not wait. What can we do next?" He hesitated, seeming to weigh his words. "There's a board meeting in 2 days. It's supposed to be closed to outsiders, but as a major investor, I'm entitled to bring someone in an advisory capacity, if I frame it correctly. If you come with me, We might confront the directors directly, corner them with your evidence." Her pulse flickered with both excitement and dread. "They'll be furious if they see me." "Exactly," Ibrahim said quietly. "Their reaction could be revealing, and if they slip up, we'll have leverage in court." She agreed, though her anxiety only grew at the thought of facing Duarte and his cohorts again. After a brief discussion of logistics, they parted ways. He slipped into a private car outside the library, while she boarded a crowded bus back home, her mind churning. Every second counted, and she was running out of time. Later that afternoon, a call from Paula jolted her from her thoughts. "I overheard something," Paula said, her voice laced with urgency. "They're trying to move sensitive documents, physical copies, to an off-site storage or maybe destroy them. Whatever it is, it's happening in the company garage tonight." Caitlin's stomach twisted. "I have to see if I can intercept them. This might be crucial evidence." "I'll help, but be careful," Paula warned. "If you're caught trespassing again." She knew the risks, yet the possibility of finding a smoking gun was too vital to ignore. That evening, Caitlin huddled near the company's underground garage entrance. This time, the usually bustling structure felt eerie and sparse. Just a few cars lined up under harsh fluorescent lights. Shadows pooled in the corners. She swallowed hard, slipping behind a concrete pillar as footsteps echoed across the slick floor. At first, no one seemed to appear. Then, a dim set of headlights illuminated several silhouettes near a back corner. 2 men in suits with a couple of heavy crates. Caitlin crept closer, staying behind tall support columns. She could just make out snippets of their conversation, all in hushed, urgent tones. "Duarte doesn't want these on site. We load them and burn them if needed." Her heart quickened. They were definitely removing evidence. She raised her phone, hoping to snap a few discreet pictures. The faint click made one of the men jerk his head around, scanning the darkness. A prickle of fear swept over her. Another step back, and her heels scraped against the pavement with a sharp squeak. One of the men cursed under his breath and strode forward. Caitlin froze, struggling to disappear into the gloom. Then a voice broke the tense silence from the opposite side of the garage. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Ibrahim emerged from behind a parked car, calm but resolute. He walked forward with measured steps, gaze locked on the men. His presence seemed to unnerve them. For a moment, they exchanged uncertain looks. Their plan clearly hadn't accounted for the Sheikh's interference. "Who the hell?" one of them began, face twisting in surprise. Without blinking, Ibrahim said, "You should answer to the board for what you're doing here, unless you'd prefer the police." A flicker of panic crossed the men's faces. They looked at each other, then at the crates. Behind her pillar, Caitlin steadied her breath, heart pounding in relief that Ibrahim had arrived. She carefully inched forward, snapping another shot of the crates for good measure. Suddenly, one of the men lunged, shoving Ibrahim. In that split second, Caitlin felt her blood turn cold. She stifled a gasp, prepared to jump in, but Ibrahim sidestepped gracefully, retaining his balance. He seized the man's wrist and twisted just enough to make him drop his aggression, an unexpectedly swift, controlled move that revealed some kind of training. The second man hesitated, uncertain whether to intervene or flee. All right, we'll leave," the first man hissed, wincing. "Don't make a scene." Ibrahim released his grip, and the man stumbled back, shooting him a venomous glare. "We're just doing what we were told." "By whom?" Ibrahim asked quietly. Neither man answered, instead rushing to the nearest exit door. The crates were left behind. Their footsteps echoed on the concrete ramp until they vanished entirely. Caitlin finally stepped into view, nerves rattled. "They almost attacked you," she breathed, adjusting her grip on her phone. He let out a slow exhale, rolling his shoulders as if to shake off the tension. "They underestimated me," he said, voice level. Then he glanced at Caitlin with a hint of concern. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, still trying to steady her voice. "I'm fine. Just grateful you showed up when you did." "Paula informed me you might come here," he explained, looking around at the crates. I couldn't let you risk this alone. Her eyes dropped to the heavy boxes. We should see what's inside, she said, stepping forward. She pried one open carefully, finding old corporate ledgers, receipts, and various documents. Even a quick skim indicated they contained references to offshore accounts and unexplainable wire transfers. Ibrahim offered a tight nod. This could be exactly what we need to tie everything together, but we need to keep it safe. They'll try again. Caitlin's heart thudded with a mixture of dread and hope. They were so close to proving the corruption, yet the directors wouldn't give up easily. She snapped more photos, then handed him a stack of papers for safekeeping. Let's go. If security shows, we'll have a hard time explaining ourselves. They tucked the files into backpacks they'd brought, hurrying toward the elevator that led out of the garage. Anxiety roiled through Caitlin's gut at every echo of their footsteps, but no alarm sounded. They slipped out onto the street, which was bathed in the glow of late-night city lights. Pedestrians were scarce, just the occasional figure rushing home. Ibrahim guided Caitlin to a quieter side street, stopping beneath a street lamp. The overhead light flickered, casting soft shadows across the pavement. She let out a shaky breath and met his gaze, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to come. And if you hadn't—" He gently set down his backpack, giving her a look of quiet reassurance. "I promised to help you. I meant it." Then, more softly, "And I can't stand by while people like Duarte threaten honest lives." Something in his tone made her pulse skip. The intensity in his eyes was more than just businesslike concern. It was protective, personal. They stood there a moment, the night air cool against their faces, the city strangely muted around them. In the dim light of a street lamp, Ibrahim takes her hand briefly, a moment charged with unspoken emotion. He promises he'll stand by her in court. Caitlin feels her heart flutter, unsure if it's relief or something else entirely. Sunlight broke through a thin layer of clouds on the morning Caitlin had dreaded for days, the court date. She barely slept the night before, her mind teeming with anxieties about how the hearing might unfold. As dawn brightened her modest bedroom walls, she dressed in the best outfit she could manage, a borrowed blazer from Paula and a simple skirt. Her hands shook when she glanced at her reflection in the small mirror above the dresser. The reflection stared back with tired eyes that still carried flickers of hope. Her grandmother stirred in the next room. Caitlin gently helped the older woman adjust her pillows, trying not to let her worry show. "It's a big day," she said softly. "Keep resting. I'll be back soon." Her grandmother patted her hand. "I know you'll do your best," she murmured, her gaze kind. "And remember, you're not alone." With that, Caitlin left the house, carefully locking the door behind her. The ride to the courthouse felt surreal. Cars sped by, people bustled on sidewalks. The city seemed oblivious to the storm raging in Caitlin's life. Yet to her, everything felt sharper, more charged. She clutched a slim folder containing the essential documents she hoped would persuade the judge of her innocence. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd of reporters had gathered, their cameras and microphones angled toward the main steps. Word of possible corporate scandal had begun to spread, and Caitlin felt her stomach drop. She'd never imagined herself at the center of such scrutiny. She tried to keep her head down, but a few of the more aggressive reporters rushed forward, shouting questions about corporate sabotage and insider theft. "It's all lies," she muttered under her breath, quickening her pace. A security guard ushered her through metal detectors and into the main lobby, where she spotted Paula waiting anxiously. Her friend offered a tense nod, handing Caitlin a small stack of last-minute printouts. "This is everything we found on that offshore account trail," Paula whispered. "I'm not sure if it'll be enough, but—" "It's better than nothing," Caitlin said, taking a shaky breath. She clutched the papers to her chest as they made their way to the courtroom's double doors. Inside, rows of wooden benches were already filled with curious onlookers and the ominous silhouettes of the company's legal team. At the front, A raised platform and an empty witness stand waited beneath the judge's bench. The air smelled faintly of old varnish and tension. Caitlin caught a glimpse of the directors sitting near their high-priced attorneys. Mr. Duarte stood out, impeccably dressed, arms folded, gaze locked on her with the same smug hostility she'd seen before. Though her pulse raced, she forced herself not to look away. She was here to clear her name. A bailiff signaled for everyone to rise as the judge entered, an older figure with keen eyes that surveyed the room, as if measuring each person's confidence. With a curt nod, the judge allowed everyone to sit, then motioned to the prosecution. The company's head attorney, a sharply dressed woman, launched into her opening statements, painting Caitlin as a disgruntled employee who intentionally accessed private corporate systems and manipulated confidential data. She claimed Caitlin had stolen sensitive documents and spread fabricated evidence of corruption to extort money. Caitlin's cheeks burned at the absurd accusations, but she clenched her jaw, waiting for her chance to speak. Paula leaned over and whispered, "They're really going all in. Don't let it rattle you." When the time came, Caitlin's appointed counsel rose, a modest lawyer who had agreed to represent her at reduced cost. He tried to rebut the claims, explaining how Caitlin stumbled upon suspicious discrepancies, did her due diligence, and was met with abrupt termination. He began introducing some of the partial evidence they had gathered, screenshots of emails, references to shady transactions, and tried to cast doubt on the director's motivations. Yet each point met fierce resistance from the company's legal team, who labeled it circumstantial or incomplete. Caitlin listened, heart pounding. She felt as if she were treading water in a rough sea. The director's lawyers were experts at twisting facts, suggesting there was no direct proof Caitlin hadn't tampered with the data herself. Each time her lawyer attempted to present something new, the company's side pounced, calling it fabricated or illegitimate. The judge's expression remained neutral, but Caitlin sensed skepticism creeping in. At a particularly tense juncture, the judge asked if Caitlin had any further witnesses to support her version of events. Her gaze darted toward the doors, and relief flooded her as they opened. Ibrahim entered, his posture poised and purposeful. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Clearly, the presence of a high-profile foreign investor drew attention. He approached the stand with quiet confidence, introducing himself and explaining his stake in the company. He stated that he had reasons to believe certain directors were embezzling funds, and that Caitlin's whistleblowing might indeed have uncovered critical pieces of the truth. He spoke of the offshore accounts, which he had started investigating, and the suspicious transactions that aligned with her claims. Some heads in the audience turned in surprise. A powerful figure was essentially backing Caitlin. Yet the company's attorneys launched a vigorous cross-examination, demanding concrete proof that the transactions were linked to the directors in question. Ibrahim admitted that the investigation was ongoing and not conclusive. He had uncovered strong indicators of malfeasance, but conclusive documentation was still being compiled. The attorneys seized on this, suggesting it was nothing more than speculation and that Caitlin was using a partial investor's interest to mask her own wrongdoing. A hush fell when the judge rapped the gavel, signaling the end of the day's session. Sweeping a stern glance over both tables, the judge explained that the evidence on Caitlin's behalf was insufficient to dismiss the sabotage charges. Without complete documentation or an expert forensic analysis, the court had no choice but to continue under the presumption that Caitlin might well be guilty. The blow landed hard, leaving Caitlin feeling as though the air had been knocked from her lungs. She stared at her hands, trembling against the table's wooden surface. She tried to hide her devastation, but tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. Paula placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, while Ibrahim approached with sympathy etched across his face. Outside the courthouse, reporters pressed closer, clamoring for comments. Flashes blinded Caitlin as she stepped down the stone steps. Questions bombarded her. "Are you a corporate thief? Is the Sheikh protecting you for personal reasons? Do you have an explanation for the judge's reaction?" She kept her gaze low, jaw tight, refusing to validate the swarm of accusations. Ibrahim guided her gently through the throng to a waiting car, cameras trailing them. Once inside, the driver eased away from the curb, leaving the sea of journalists behind. The silence in the back seat was heavy. Caitlin stared out the tinted window, her mind replaying the judge's words. She had thought that with Ibrahim's testimony, the tide might turn. Instead, it felt like a stalemate, and a very precarious one at that. "I'm sorry," she murmured, not looking at Ibrahim. "I hoped it'd go differently." "You have nothing to apologize for," he assured her, voice low but firm. "They've spent a lot of money and influence to corner you. We just haven't found the final piece of proof we need." She nodded, pressing her lips together to contain her emotions. The drive felt interminable, city lights reflecting off the windows. Eventually, they approached her neighborhood, where the street was quieter, the houses more modest. Ibrahim asked the driver to pull over in front of her home. Caitlin could see the silhouette of her grandmother behind the curtains, likely waiting anxiously. She thanked Ibrahim softly, stepping out onto the curb. He handed her a small business card with a direct number. "Call any time," he said gently, "day or night. We'll find a way." She nodded, appreciating his unwavering calm. Then she closed the door, and the car pulled away. She felt both gratitude for his support and an acute fear of what tomorrow might hold. Shoulders slumped, she walked up the driveway. Just as she reached the doorstep, her phone vibrated in her purse. She pulled it out, seeing Paula's number. There was noise in the background, a hum of computers or distant chatter. "Caitlin!" Paula's voice was breathless, excited. "I stayed late at work. Found a hidden folder in the company system. It's locked, but it looks huge. Could be the missing puzzle piece we've needed." Caitlin's heart lurched with renewed energy. "Really?" "Yes. I've downloaded what I could, but it's encrypted. If we can crack it, we might have airtight evidence. I'll keep trying." Caitlin's knees almost buckled with relief. Images of the judge's wary expression floated in her mind, but so did the possibility that this discovery might tilt the scales of justice at last. She thanked Paula, hung up, and stood there a moment, letting the hope wash over her. As they pull up to Caitlin's house, her phone rings. Paula discovered a hidden folder in the company system containing what might be the final missing puzzle pieces. Caitlin's hope reignites. Caitlin couldn't slow the rush of adrenaline that coursed through her the moment Paula's call ended. She stood motionless on her doorstep, night air cool against her cheeks, phone clutched so tightly that her fingertips tingled. A hidden folder, possibly the final missing key. All her exhaustion from the courtroom battle dissolved into a vivid sense of urgency. She fumbled for her keys and let herself inside. Her grandmother was dozing, the television's low volume illuminating the worn-out living room. Caitlin tiptoed past, gently laying a hand on her grandmother's shoulder before heading to the kitchen. She flipped on a single overhead light, set her phone on the small table, and just stood there, breathing fast. Paula's voice had trembled with excitement, and Caitlin felt hope stirring in her own chest. Hope that they might be able to prove once and for all that she wasn't some corporate saboteur, but a whistleblower shedding light on serious crimes. Unable to sit still, she called Paula back. It rang only once before Paula answered, sounding harried. "I'm trying to decrypt the files, but it's not easy," she whispered. "I think they've used a professional encryption service. If I could get an IT pro to help, maybe we'd crack it faster." Caitlin's mind raced. "I might know someone," she said, thinking of a friend of Paula's from the IT department who had sympathized with them before. Or maybe even Ibrahim could bring in an expert. Paula hesitated. "It has to be someone we trust. If the directors catch wind we're poking around, they'll shred every last piece of evidence." Caitlin promised to handle it discreetly. After ending the call, she phoned Ibrahim. Night had fully settled, and she realized she was disturbing him at a late hour, but urgency wouldn't let her wait. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm yet quickly attentive when he heard the news. "Send me what you can," he said, sounding more awake by the second. "I'll have a security consultant on it tonight." She thanked him softly, heart fluttering with gratitude. His confidence, unwavering in the face of all they had uncovered, steadied her nerves. Despite the looming threats, it felt as if they were finally inches from a breakthrough. Within the hour, Paula emailed portions of the encrypted data. Caitlin forwarded it to Ibrahim, then huddled beside her laptop at the small kitchen table, feeling the minutes crawl. Every so often she glanced at her grandmother's bedroom door, praying that she would remain safe, that no one would try to strike back tonight. When her phone rang again, it was close to midnight. "We've cracked part of it," Ibrahim said, voice tense. "Details about offshore holding companies, bank transactions, and—" He paused as if scanning his notes. "Links to multiple board members. Their names are in these files, Caitlin. This could be exactly what we need." She could practically feel her heart drumming in her throat. "That's amazing." His tone grew cautious. "We should handle this carefully. Let's meet tomorrow. We'll go through the decrypted files and strategize." "Tomorrow," she agreed, voice shaking with a surge of hope. She didn't sleep much. Every time her eyes closed, her mind conjured images of lawyers, judges, and Duarte's sneer. Yet beneath the anxiety thrummed that persistent conviction. They'd found it at last, the puzzle piece that could bring the director's scheme to light. If they succeeded, she might not only clear her name but also protect her grandmother from any future threats. Morning found her bleary-eyed but determined. She placed a gentle kiss on her grandmother's forehead before heading out, whispering that she'd bring back good news. At a small conference room in a modest hotel, she met Ibrahim, who had arrived moments earlier, laptop and folders spread out on a polished table. Sunlight streamed in from tall windows, cutting stripes across the carpet. "Look at this," he said without preamble, pointing to lines of text on the screen. Caitlin hovered beside him, scanning the data. Bank names she didn't recognize, transaction IDs, references to large sums, and peppered throughout were initials that she recognized, senior directors, along with accounts belonging to shell companies. Her pulse skipped. "They've been siphoning funds," she breathed, following the numbers with her fingertip, "and then diverting them to personal accounts." Ibrahim nodded gravely. "We suspected as much, but now it's documented, and some of these transactions have your old project codes attached, as if they used your department's budget as a cover." A shiver of anger and validation coursed through her. "They fired me to keep me quiet and blame me for any discrepancy." He turned to look at her, his gaze softening. "This all but proves their motive. Once we present these files, the court can't ignore the pattern." She raised her eyes to meet his. "We have to confront them. Soon. They'll do anything to hide this." He nodded. "There's a board meeting tomorrow. You should come with me, just as we planned. Let's corner them with the evidence before they have any chance to destroy more proof." She swallowed, feeling a hint of fear mixed with relief. Facing those directors again, especially in a high-stakes environment, was daunting. But the memory of the last court hearing, how powerless she'd felt, was still fresh. This time, she wouldn't be the one stumbling in with half-formed evidence. She'd have an arsenal of proof at her side. They spent the next hours preparing. Piece by piece, they organized the files, labeling each crucial snippet of data that tied back to specific board members or transactions. Ibrahim's unwavering calm bolstered Caitlin's confidence. His presence, once a distant authority figure, had become a source of unexpected comfort. They'd text Paula updates, who would verify from the inside that none of the suspicious directors were catching wind of their plan. Finally, they closed the laptop, documents set aside, and inhaled deeply. Caitlin noticed for the first time how close she and Ibrahim stood, shoulders nearly touching. She realized their partnership had evolved, blending a sense of shared mission with an undercurrent of unspoken emotion. She looked up at him, remembering how he'd intervened more than once, protecting her in the parking garage, offering comfort after the court hearing. His eyes shone with empathy. "You've given me hope," she murmured, her voice catching. "If you hadn't believed me—" He placed a warm hand on her shoulder. "I believed the truth," he replied gently, "and I won't let them tear your life apart any more than they already have." Her heart fluttered at the genuine concern in his words. She had grown accustomed to standing alone, fending off accusations and threats without much backup. Now the weight of it all felt a little less suffocating. For a moment she let herself be grateful for the unexpected closeness that had formed between them. The precarious situation had thrown them together, forging a bond out of necessity, and something deeper than mere necessity. Outside the hotel they stepped into the bright midday sun. A slight breeze ruffled her hair, and he guided her to a nearby cafe for a quick coffee. They spoke quietly, planning the next day's board meeting confrontation. While sipping warm cappuccinos, they mapped out who would present which pieces of evidence and how to handle the director's inevitable attempts to discredit it. At one point, Ibrahim leaned forward, a small smile curving his lips. "You're handling this with more bravery than many professionals I know," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Your grandmother must be proud." Caitlin blushed faintly, nerves and gratitude twisting inside her. "I just want this nightmare to end," she said, "and to protect her. She's all I have." He reached across the tiny table, lightly covering her hand with his own. The gesture was brief, subtle enough that passers-by wouldn't pay it any mind. But to Caitlin, it felt like a lifeline. Their eyes locked, and unspoken feelings flared to life. The intensity of the moment stirred something new, a sensation of possibility that clashed with the tension and danger surrounding them. Back home that evening, she found her grandmother in surprisingly good spirits. She'd received a phone call from an old friend, and the conversation had buoyed her mood. Eager to keep the energy positive, Caitlin shared a watered-down version of the day's events, focusing on the good news that they'd found more evidence, leaving out the specifics of encryption and corporate secrets. It was enough to bring a spark to the older woman's tired eyes. As night fell, Caitlin double-checked her windows and doors, mindful of the ongoing threats. She transferred the crucial files to a USB drive, which she tucked into a small hidden compartment in her desk. On a whim, she also emailed a backup to a newly created address. She'd been cornered too often to take chances now. With her heart still racing from the day's discoveries, she finally settled onto the living room couch, letting the hum of the TV lull her grandmother to sleep. Tomorrow would be massive, a confrontation with the board, brandishing evidence that could topple powerful people. Anxiety prickled at the edges of her exhaustion, but she clung to the sense that perhaps, for the first time in weeks, the truth was on her side in full force. Breathing heavily outside the glass doors, Caitlin locks eyes with Ibrahim, and he whispers, "I'll stand by you to the end." She realizes in that instant how powerfully they've come to rely on each other, emotionally as much as professionally. Morning arrived with a tense stillness in the air. Caitlin stood before her mirror, taking slow, deliberate breaths as she fastened the buttons of her blouse. Today was the day she and Ibrahim would unveil everything, the offshore accounts, the fabricated reports, the hidden folder, before a full board meeting. No more half measures or fears about what might happen. This was their chance to expose every lie that had cost her so much. She glanced at her grandmother, comfortably propped up on pillows. The older woman waved a gentle hand and smiled with pride. "You've come so far," she murmured. "Go finish this." Outside, the sky stretched in a clear blue, sunlight glinting off cars lining the street. A ride soon pulled up, and Caitlin recognized Ibrahim's personal driver behind the wheel. With a trembling mix of anxiety and hope, she slipped into the back seat. Ibrahim was already there, dressed in a tailored suit but with an air of somber determination. He gave her a soft smile. "You're ready?" he asked quietly. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, clutching a slim folder on her lap. "I just want the truth laid out so we can move on." The building, once an imposing place of her employment, now felt almost like a battleground. They stepped into the polished lobby, passing through clusters of employees who whispered behind hands or paused to stare. Word had clearly spread that a major confrontation was about to take place. There was a taut hush in the air. At the elevator banks, Paula appeared, hastily straightening her blazer. Relief warmed Caitlin's chest at the sight of her friend's supportive grin. The three of them boarded an elevator, ascending in silence until they reached the executive floor. The doors slid open to reveal a reception area bustling with tense energy, assistants scurrying to prepare for the board meeting, a handful of security personnel hovering by glass doors. Ibrahim led Caitlin and Paula into a long conference room where the board of directors had already gathered around a massive oval table. Leather chairs, large windows framing the city skyline beyond, and hushed murmurs of discontent set the stage. Caitlin's heart pounded as Mr. Duarte lifted his gaze, clearly displeased by her presence. Several other directors looked rattled but tried to maintain a veneer of calm. "Ibrahim," one of the senior members said curtly, "we didn't anticipate you bringing guests." Ibrahim took a seat at the head of the table, voice resonating with quiet authority. "As the principal investor, I have every right to ensure transparency. Ms. Morgan has essential information to share regarding the management of certain funds." A ripple of tension moved through the directors. Duarte narrowed his eyes. "We have no time for personal vendettas. The court is handling Ms. Morgan's allegations." Caitlin swallowed, then spoke up, voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "The court is handling your lawsuit against me. False charges you used to bury the truth. I've brought evidence today that proves the real wrongdoing lies right here." She slid a USB drive across the table, and Paula connected it to the large screen at the front of the room. One by one, spreadsheets and transaction logs appeared. Clear references to offshore accounts, forged authorizations, and blatantly diverted funds. The air grew thick with disbelief as line after line exposed hidden sums connected to a handful of the very people seated at that table. Murmurs swelled in the room, some directors demanding explanations, others shooting panicked glances at Duarte. No longer able to feign ignorance, Duarte tried to sputter an excuse, calling the files fabrications. But Paula scrolled to messages signed with his initials and timestamps from the company's own servers. His face paled. Ibrahim leaned forward, voice like steel. "You entrusted me with misleading profit reports, siphoning funds through subsidiaries tied to my investments, and framed Ms. Morgan when she got close to uncovering your scheme, all while endangering her livelihood and her grandmother's well-being." A hush fell, broken only by the uneven breathing of several board members. One director, previously silent, stood up to condemn Duarte, claiming she had no idea how deep this went. Others followed, either pleading ignorance or frantically distancing themselves. Meanwhile, Caitlin locked eyes with Duarte, recalling every threat, every moment of fear she'd endured. In the confusion, security officers stepped in, summoned by someone who had already phoned the authorities. It wasn't long before the police arrived, ushering in a stiff air of finality. As uniforms swept through, collecting evidence, at least two of the directors tried to slip away, only to be stopped at the door, phones confiscated, eyes wide with guilt. Caitlin's heart raced as she watched law enforcement gather folders and laptops. The board meeting that began with tension now dissolved into frantic denials and the unmistakable hum of handcuffs clicking. She stared in amazement at the scene, barely believing the power that truth could hold once it was undeniable. When it was over, the room stood nearly empty. Most of the directors involved were led off by the police, while the few who remained wiped sweat from their brows, trying to salvage what was left of the company's reputation. Paula let out a soft laugh of disbelief, hugging Caitlin in the corner. "We did it," she whispered. Ibrahim approached, expression calmer now, though a trace of sadness lingered in his eyes. "I regret we had to come to this. but I'm relieved justice prevailed. Later that day, an emergency press conference convened to address the shocking scandal. Surprisingly, the interim CEO publicly apologized to Caitlin, acknowledging her role in exposing the corruption. Cameras flashed, journalists clamored for quotes, and in a moment that left her nearly speechless, the company declared they would withdraw their suit against her, seek to settle any damages caused, and offer her a position in helping reorganize the financial department, an olive branch to right the wrongs she had suffered. Caitlin accepted the apology with composure. As she stepped away from the microphones, Ibrahim caught her elbow gently, guiding her toward a quieter corridor. "Are you all right?" he asked, reading the swirl of emotions on her face. She nodded, a trembling smile breaking through. "I am. I just never expected this outcome. Clearing my name, exposing the fraud. It feels like I finally got my life back." He reached into his jacket pocket, producing a small envelope. "There's something else I'd like to give you. Consider it a gesture of gratitude and admiration for everything you did." Inside the envelope, Caitlin found the title and key details to a new apartment, a luxurious place with space for her grandmother's medical needs, overlooking a peaceful park. Her eyes brimmed with tears. I can't accept something this lavish," she managed, voice shaking. Ibrahim's gaze was warm. "Yes, you can. You've earned the right to live safely and comfortably after all the turmoil. This is my way of ensuring you and your grandmother are cared for." Her protests faded as he guided her gently. "At least visit it," he teased with a soft laugh. "Then decide." In the following weeks, events moved quickly. Investigations cleared Caitlin of every charge, and official apologies were filed. With settlement money, she covered her grandmother's medical bills, ensuring the older woman finally received top-notch care. And for the company, a rigorous transformation process began, rooted in transparency, a process Caitlin was invited to help oversee. It was an incredible turnaround, something she would have deemed impossible just a short time before. In the midst of this new stability, she found herself growing closer to Ibrahim. The tension and danger that had first pulled them together evolved into a steadfast admiration, then tenderness. They shared quiet evenings on the balcony of her newly furnished apartment. They compared cultural traditions, laughed over memories from the chaos of the investigation, and found in each other a sense of profound respect. One brisk morning, Caitlin woke feeling dizzy and lightheaded, unable to stomach her usual cup of coffee. Concerned, she visited a small clinic. The doctor's eventual smile was warm but shocking. She was pregnant, and there were 2 tiny heartbeats, not just one. She left the clinic in a daze, protective instincts already flaring to life. She called Ibrahim from the curb, voice trembling. "There's big news. I'm expecting twins." Silence on the line, then an outpouring of joyful disbelief. He promised he would come straight over, that they would figure everything out together. As the call ended, Caitlin pressed a protective hand to her stomach, still overwhelmed by how swiftly her life had changed. That night, Caitlin and Ibrahim stood on the balcony of her new home, gazing at the sprawling city skyline. He rested a gentle hand over her abdomen. She closed her eyes, reflecting on how losing her job had once felt like the end of her world. But it led her to a love she had never expected, a safe haven for her grandmother, and 2 precious lives awaiting the future. Caitlin and Ibrahim stand together on the balcony of her new home, gazing at the city skyline. He gently places a hand on her abdomen. She reflects that losing her job was the start of an unimaginable journey, one that led her to love, a safe home, and 2 precious little lives on the way. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen